It's them! Uygur and Kasparian with you guys on a lovely Tuesday afternoon / evening. We have lovely news for you guys, do we? Some lovely news. Some interesting.
We have news.
We definitely have news, and it's definitely interesting. So, having said that, let us get to the aforementioned interesting news.
Well, we've got some updates on one of Trump's multiple criminal investigations. So let's do it. Former President Donald Trump could be facing additional criminal indictments this summer. That's news coming from the Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis, who has sent a letter to a top law enforcement official in the state of Georgia to essentially set a timeline in regard to when they can expect criminal charges if she files criminal charges against Trump. Now, this particular investigation has to do with Trump's efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 election in Georgia. In her letter, Willis, again, the district attorney in Fulton County, Georgia, said that any charges would come during the court term that runs between July 11th and September 1st of this year. Her office has spent more than 2 years investigating whether Trump and his cronies illegally meddled in Georgia's 2020 election. Trump did lose that state to Biden, and after he did, he hit up the election officials in the state to basically demand that they find ballots that would overturn the results of the election from Biden to Trump. In fact, there's some evidence to that point, and here it is.
I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state. The people of Georgia are angry. The people of the country are angry, and there's nothing wrong with saying that, that you've recalculated.
CBS News has confirmed that this was one of at least 18 attempted calls from the White House to Secretary Raffensperger.
Now, Willis has a tough case ahead of her because there's just really a lack of evidence here. What is she gonna do? How would she bring these charges considering the lack of evidence, Cenk?
Yeah, so this has a ton of political implications, obviously, right? And I think that there might be a tipping point issue in terms of this beginning to finally hurt Donald Trump. We'll get to that in a second. In terms of the substance of it, look, I'm not of the same mind as a lot of other pundits. So I think that the Stormy Daniels case is actually the most open and shut. He definitely did it. His co-conspirator went to prison for 3 years. People say, oh, we just got him on hush money to a porn star. I don't care what it's about. Did he break the law or didn't he? And how much evidence do you have? On that case, we have overwhelming evidence. In this case in Georgia, it should be a lot tougher to prove, because you have to prove that he didn't just ask for votes to be found that were legitimately his, but votes to be found that were not legitimately his, and to rig the election, right? So it's super easy to get away with this crime by just being a little vague, right? The problem for Trump is he's an idiot. And he can't be a little vague.
He ain't vague.
No, and
he was actually, the specificity in the number of ballots he wanted Raffensperger to find is pretty incredible.
No,
right?
guys, the only way that you could get convicted for this crime is to do exactly what Trump just did.
It's amazing.
He's like, I need 11,780 votes. No, you're supposed to say, hey, are you sure the recount is right, right? Now, first of all, you're not supposed to do any of that. You're supposed to accept the Democratic elections as they actually are, not as you wish them to be, right? But By the way, asking Georgia election officials or any state officials, are you sure? I have a legal right to a recount, a hand recount. No problem.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Zero.
Exactly. Yeah.
And in fact, Georgia did several of those recounts, including a hand recount. So Trump asking for those is not remotely illegal, right? But when after all that is done, he calls and says, give me 11,780 votes, one more than I need to win. And then he says, why don't you recalculate? Instead of saying, hey, are you sure that you got the count right? Are you sure that you don't have any missing ballots? He's being as brazenly illegal as he could possibly be. You know how he likes to say, I had a perfect call, in his first impeachment, I had a perfect call with the leader of Ukraine. I mean, this kind of was a perfect call in the opposite direction.
Yeah, it's a perfect call for the prosecution.
Exactly.
Right, so obviously I was being sarcastic when I noted that there was a lack of evidence. There's clearly some pretty significant evidence, you just heard it. Now, let's rewind a little bit to kind of give you the background on this investigation and this case. Because prior to the possibility of criminal indictments being brought forth to a jury, a grand jury, there was a special jury involved, right? So what happened with this special jury? Special jury that heard evidence in the case for roughly 7 months, recommended more than a dozen people for indictments, and its forewoman strongly hinted in an interview with the New York Times in February that Trump was among them. So I actually went back to read that piece from back in February by the New York Times to see what the actual statement was. The forewoman that they're referring to is Emily Kors, asked whether the jurors had recommended indicting Trump. Kors would not answer directly, but said, you're not going to be shocked. It's not rocket science. It's not going to be some giant plot twist. You probably have a fair idea of what may be in there. I'm trying very hard to say that delicately. So that was the provocative statement that she gave to the Times back in February. Real quick, before I go to you, Cenk, but keep in mind that ultimately it is up to Fani Willis, the prosecutor, to make the decision as to who gets charged, what the charges might be, and she will bring those charges to a grand jury to move forward with this case if she chooses to. But it does seem as though she intends to move forward with this case.
So Anna's giving you the facts, I'll give you the analysis. Two things, number one, yeah, they're definitely indicting Trump. And number two, meaning that he's among the 12. And number two, they're definitely gonna go forward with it. And so why do I say that? Especially given that there's been a lot of talk about Trump indictments and it's taken forever and ever and ever. And most of the time it's just a lot of baloney and just Democrats trying to grab headlines. In this case, in her letter, she talks over and over again about the need for security.
Yes.
They don't need security for 11 other bozos, okay? So it's like, oh my God, they have indicted Jim Jablowski, who was helping Trump at the local level. That guy's under a bus already, right? He's under a tank. Trump's not gonna give him a dime. No one cares, his voters don't care. No, the only reason you need that kind of massive security is because Trump is among the names and you're definitely going to indict him, okay?
Right, and her letter, just to give you even more context, was sent to Sheriff Patrick Labat. I actually want to read excerpts from the letter to kind of buttress what Cenk is saying here in regard to the calls for additional security when these indictments are announced. She writes, quote, in the near future, I will announce charging decisions resulting from the investigation my office has been conducting into possible criminal interference in the administration of Georgia's 2020 general election. I am providing this letter to bring to your attention the need for heightened security and preparedness in coming months due to this pending announcement.
Yeah, they're definitely indicting him.
By the way, she has some members of her staff wear bulletproof vests.
I know, yeah.
Which is crazy.
It is, but on the other hand, right-wingers are violent. And so-
No, I'm not saying it's crazy that she's having them wear the vests. It's crazy that we live in this era where political violence has become normalized.
Yeah, it's so normal that we have to prepare for it ahead of time, et cetera. Yeah. All right, so let's get to the beef, which is how does this affect the election and politics and stuff? So look, I always believe that that they're like, first when everybody said after the midterms Trump is done, you saw us here say that's not remotely true. Trump not only still has a great chance, but he wavers from a 50-50 election to being the overwhelming favorite. He was never, ever the underdog. So there was too much hype about the demise of Donald Trump that was never true. Now they're in reverse and they say, oh my God, he got indicted. That only helps him in the polling. It's over. Trump's definitely gonna be the candidate. That's also not true. And so one indictment is one thing, but 3 or 4 of them, it starts to pile up and people get tired, right? Even like hardcore MAGA never gets tired, but the rest of the Republican electorate, as much as you can make a distinction between hardcore MAGA and 93% of Republicans that voted for Trump last time. So when this one comes in, as it looks like it's definitely gonna come in, and probably at least a third one comes in, I think that Republican voters are gonna start to get really worried, right? And by the way, a huge point in my favor in that kind of prediction or whatever you wanna call it, is that after he got the initial bump from the first indictment, in the last couple of weeks, he's lost 10 points. So it went up and then now it's coming back down. So the problem the thing is, he needs someone who's really good at this to knock his ass out in the midst of all of these legal troubles, et cetera. Not necessarily now, but as the indictments pile up. Well, I don't know that we got that, guys. You'll see later in the show, DeSantis is weak. So, no, Trump is pummeling him.
Trump is pummeling him and has now put out one of the most vicious and I would argue effective ads against DeSantis. I can't wait to show that to you guys and talk about that in more detail. But I don't know, my prediction on this is a little different, Cenk. I think that Trump is inevitably going to win the Republican nomination. And when it really comes down to it, the election will be decided by independent voters. So is this gonna turn independent voters off? Are they willing to overlook some of Biden's flaws and vote for him, considering all the chaos that comes along with Trump? That's the real question. And we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, look, this election could be the most boring and worst election of our lifetimes as it's a Biden and Trump rematch. Oh, literally nobody in the country wants that except hardcore MAGA and hardcore establishment knuckleheads Democrats in DC. But those are like 14 guys, right? The rest of the Democratic Party doesn't want it either. But yeah, it certainly could be that. Or you got wild cards galore. I mean, this guy, if he's indicted 3-4 times, really he's gonna run in the midst of all those court cases? Remember, Trump might make a deal and to get out of the race, but to get rescued from all these indictments. So who knows, right? And then on the Democratic side, Biden's gonna make it all the way to the election? I don't know. Well, I don't know.
Now would be a great time to talk about that because Biden decided to launch his reelection campaign today.
When I ran for president 4 years ago, I said we're in a battle for the soul of America, and we still are. The question we're facing is whether in the years ahead we have more freedom or less freedom, more rights or fewer. I know what I want the answer to be, and I think you do too. This is not a time to be complacent. That's why I'm running for re-election.
President Joe Biden has officially announced his re-election bid, and he did so by putting out a 3-minute-long announcement video that urges Americans to get together and finish the job. The video was meant to be inspiring, but also took some jabs at Republicans and what they've done to roll back some of the freedoms that Americans were able to enjoy previously. So let's go to that, and then we'll discuss.
Freedom. Personal freedom is fundamental to who we are as Americans. There's nothing more important, nothing more sacred. That's been the work of my first term, to fight for our democracy. This shouldn't be a red revolution. To protect our rights, to make sure that everyone in this country is treated equally and that everyone is given a fair shot at making it. But you know, around the country, MAGA extremists are lining up to take on those bedrock freedoms, cutting Social Security, that you've paid for your entire life while cutting taxes for the very wealthy, dictating what healthcare decisions women can make, banning books, and telling people who they can love.
And that was about as harsh as Biden was in his announcement video. I think that it was right for him to point to all these different issues that are unpopular among GOP politicians. Certainly the rollback of reproductive rights helped the Democratic Party during the 2022 midterms. But I have to also be honest, I watched that announcement video immediately after watching Trump's latest attack ad against Ron DeSantis. And I wish I hadn't done that because it left me wanting more from Biden.
Yeah, no, that's funny because I did it in reverse order. I'm gonna be much more harsh. That ad sucked. It was 3 minutes and I nearly dozed off in the middle. Like it felt like 3 hours. It was just platitude after platitude of I'm for freedom and America is great.
There was a lot about individual freedom, which it's so interesting to hear the Democratic Party take on the jargon, the rhetoric that we typically would have heard from the Republican Party back in the day. Like this emphasis on individual freedom.
No, I know why, because that Biden's whole career has been copying Republicans. That's all he ever does. He just copies Republicans and says, but I'm less vicious. Okay, it's not a red issue, it's not a blue issue. What's their talking points? I mean, by the end, he's gonna be like, make America spectacular again. Okay, come on, dude, come up with something original. Like in that ad, he did everything but puppies are cute. It was so boring. That 15 seconds you saw of him attacking MAGA extremists, that's it. That's the only part that was interesting in the ad. The other 2 minutes and 45 seconds are nothing. It's cotton balls. And that's Joe Biden. He's a terrible candidate. Terrible.
So after he made his announcement, the Republican National Committee put out their response video. It's getting a lot of attention because it's allegedly generated 100% by AI, which is really scary because it doesn't seem like it's generated by AI. It's actually pretty well done. And as you can imagine, I mean, it's coming from the Republican National Committee. It's pretty vicious. Let's watch.
We can now call the 2024 presidential race for Joe Biden.
My fellow Americans.
This morning, an emboldened China invades Taiwan.
Financial markets are in free fall as 500 regional banks have shuttered their doors.
Border agents were overrun by a surge of 80,000 illegals yesterday evening.
Officials closed the city of San Francisco this morning, citing the escalating crime and fentanyl crisis.
Who's in charge here?
It feels like the train is coming off the track.
Now notice how that response video to Biden's reelection announcement talks about the future if Biden gets elected and didn't really attack Biden on the 4 years, or not the 4 years, but the amount of time he's been in office already, like what he has done in office already. I would venture to say that if they had things to attack him on, then they would have used that. Instead, they just made things up that could happen in the future if he gets reelected.
No, that ad sucked. Trump's ads against DeSantis are 1,000 times better. Okay, so the reason why that ad sucked is there's a great number of reasons. Number one, this is exactly the ads they ran against Biden last time and they lost on those ads. Second of all, they said all this stuff was already gonna happen in this first term, but it didn't. So it really falls flat. So for the extreme MAGA crowd, they're gonna love this, right? They're like, oh my God, it's an imminent collapse of society. They love that. They got their canned tuna ready. They got all their ammunition ready. They bought gold. They're ready, right? But it hasn't happened. It's not gonna happen. They're still looking for the FEMA camps that Obama set up.
I mean, look,
right? So, but outside of that crowd, this is gonna feel stupid and a retread and things that didn't happen and looks ridiculous. And in the beginning, they're like, imagine if Biden is reelected. Wait, so you agree that he was elected?
That's right.
And if it's Trump, are we really going to run a whole campaign where Trump pretends that he won last time? That's crazy, right? So I mean, we all know that like the only reason why Biden has any chance of winning is because Trump might be the nominee on the other side, and he's literally the only politician in the country less popular than Joe Biden. Biden's at 38%, Trump's at 34%.
Which is why the Democratic Party is elated that things seem to be shaping up as a rematch between Biden and Trump. And I wanted to talk a little bit about that because look, my concern is when Democrats get a little too cocky And it does appear to be the case here, similar
100%.
to how they were in 2016. Don't take this situation for granted. Don't underestimate your opponent. And I see a little bit of that happening now, according to reporting from Politico. So Politico spoke to a number of Democrats, and some, to be fair, are skeptical at the cockiness. But I'll start with the Democrats who think this is great. This is a win for Biden. Democrats aren't blind to his stubbornly low approval ratings, but they also know Trump's polarizing profile, including an indictment, his fixation on the 2020 election, and polarizing profile both within his own party and among independents could be their best matchup in 2024. So that's the general gist of how the establishment Democratic Party is feeling about this situation. Let's go to Debbie Stabenow, who of course is a Democratic senator. She's retiring, but Stabenow thinks this is the best possible outcome, meaning a matchup between Trump and Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Trump's obviously an extremely dangerous person who would be very dangerous for the country, but I'm confident that President Biden would beat him. Politically, for us, it's helpful if Trump is front and center. Broadly, she says, the public rejects him. So, look, I agree that this is ultimately gonna come down to the independent voters, and Trump does rub people the wrong way.
But he is anti-establishment, which independent voters love.
Also, Trump has shown that he is planning to go back to what made him so popular in 2016, which is this hyper focus on faux populism, faux economic populism.
Yeah.
He didn't do much of that in 2020.
That's right, and he's talking nonstop about corruption. Now, it's self-serving and he's claiming that his arrests are corruption, but American people hate corruption and no other politicians allowed to talk about it because the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, and most importantly, corporate media will rip their face off if they mention the thing that we all know exists, which is massive corruption in Washington, right? The reporters will not let you report on that if their life's dependent on it. There's no way. The first person who talks about corruption, they smear job after smear job after, but Trump doesn't care. He's been smeared 2,000 times. He's just gonna keep saying the word corrupt, and that's gonna resonate. So look, do you want to talk about playing with fire and being overconfident? You know what Trump's approval rating was on election day in 2016, the day that he won? It was 36%.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I went back and checked because I was writing it in my book. And I went back and found the sources, 36%.
Well, you went back and looked at that. I actually wanted to go back to find the numbers in regard to the key battleground states where Biden beat Trump, because it was really down to 3 key battleground states. And it's important to understand that and know that, because when it comes to the Electoral College, Biden barely won, barely. Okay, so let me give you the actual details on that. Let's go to the last graphic here. The tight races in the trio of states, and the trio includes Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin, had a big electoral impact. As NPR's Domenico Montanaro has put it, just 44,000 votes in Georgia, Arizona, and Wisconsin separated Biden and Trump from a tie in the Electoral College. Okay, so I give you that because those numbers are razor thin in these key battleground states in 2020. And Trump had the stink of the coronavirus pandemic on him. He did not campaign on the economic populism that he tapped into in 2016. He seems far more aware and willing to tap back into that for 2023. I'm just saying that I hope Democrats didn't learn all the wrong lessons from the midterm elections. I think that they've become a little overconfident after that.
100%.
Right?
I'll go way further. So when in political they say, oh, now the Democrats are not blind to Joe Biden's problems. No, they are. They're definitely blind to it. When you tell them that people that he polls at 38%, they're like, no, but he got a lot accomplished. First of all, that's not true. But even if it were true, it doesn't matter. What matters is, do people like him or don't they like him? Because we're about to go into a popularity contest called an election. So you know that, so Biden won by that razor thin margin because of younger voters. They showed up 11% more than they did in 2016. It made all of the difference. It's the only reason Biden won. You know what Biden's popularity is among younger voters now? Now remember, younger voters are very progressive. And Joe Biden is apparently the second coming of FDR according to Democrats, right? He's polling at 25%. Among young voters, he's got to be at like 75% among young voters. He's at 25%. It's not like that they like Trump, but they really have no interest in Joe Biden.
Another thing to keep in mind, though, is remember the DNC is intentionally suppressing primary challengers by refusing to hold any primary debates. And when you look at how young people on TikTok feel toward Marianne Williamson, I think the DNC is actually hurting Biden by making it clear that they're trying to suppress primary challengers like Marianne Williamson, who seems to be popular with young voters.
By the way, so we're equal opportunity truth tellers. Trump pulled a bitch move today, and he's like, I'm not gonna debate. Okay,
which is so stupid.
That's so dumb.
Stupid.
Are you kidding me? Trump, you'd rip DeSantis' face off in a debate. But okay, good, don't debate, whatever, okay? I don't want Trump to, and I hate Trump. So I'm honest about our opinions. But I'm telling, and number one reason I'm worried about Biden is because I think he's gonna lose, right? But whenever you say it on TV or in the press at all, the swarm of locusts of DNC consultants attack, and they're like, Biden's the only one who could win. You guys, you're playing with fire. You're playing with all of our lives. You're playing with democracy. He won at 36% last time around. He could easily be at 36% and win this time around. You guys almost blew it the last time. You definitely blew it the time before. It's the same clowns. And now we're gonna have two guys that are above 76 years old. They're both going to be hiding in their basements, right? Neither one is gonna debate. This is the worst election ever. No one wants either one of the candidates. Our democracy is in shambles. And they forced literally the two most unpopular politicians in the country as our only two choices. It's disgusting.
Pretty devastating, and I agree with that analysis 100%. We gotta take a break. When we come back, I gotta be honest, probably one of the most vicious Trump ads, this time attacking DeSantis, of course. You don't wanna miss it. We've got that and more coming up.
All right, back on TYT. I just read a whole bunch of names during the social media break of people who just joined. We appreciate it, guys. You can do likewise at tyt.com/join. But I wanted to read from one of our YouTube members. Anthony McClendon wrote in, good evening, guys. I've been a long supporter of #Anna was right due to her amazing ability to see through people and their BS. Here.
Thank you.
Now that Tucker departed Fox in exactly the way he predicted, #Cenk was right.
Yep. No, I guess we're in the prediction business because we predict all the time, and it turns out that we make pretty good predictions.
Yeah, look, man, like with the psychics, if we could just turn that a little bit towards the stock market, we might finally have some money for the left wing. Okay, the problem is all of our predictions are in politics. Yeah. So them becoming right is actually depressing because we always predict things that are not going to go well, and they never go well, and we're right?
True. Although
Tucker leaving, that went well.
You did make one giant, terrible prediction that never came to fruition.
About Trump?
Yeah.
Hold on, I'm gonna fix that one.
Okay, but you already lost it.
I know, but let's see. I always have plans.
All right,
I always have plans. Okay. All right, let's go forward.
All right, you guys, buckle up. Brace for impact. This is my personal favorite story of the day because of how much fun it is. Let's do it.
Ron DeSantis was struggling big time in his primary race for governor of Florida. Polls revealed DeSantis was failing so bad, he was losing by a staggering 17 points. Then DeSantis was saved by the endorsement of President Trump.
The PAC for Donald Trump has put out one of the most vicious political ads I have ever encountered. Of course, it's against Ron DeSantis. That has been Trump's focus for months now. And wait till you hear how much money Trump's PAC is spending on hitting DeSantis where it hurts. But before we do that, let's watch a little more of that viciousness.
Trump's support was so powerful, just 2 days after the endorsement, DeSantis took a commanding lead, and it propelled him to being elected governor.
I'd like to thank our president for standing by me when it wasn't necessarily the smart thing to do.
You're welcome, Ron. Unfortunately, instead of being grateful, DeSantis is now attacking the very man who saved his career. Isn't it time DeSantis remembers how he got to where he is?
Make America great again. Big league. So good. Build the wall. Then Mr. Trump said, "You're fired." I love that part.
Truth is, there's only one person who can make America great again.
Murder.
Yeah.
187, that's what that was.
Yeah, 187 on a Florida governor.
Yeah.
So this is what Trump's good at. And so this is PAC, and it's not Trump directing it, but the fish in this case does the right things politically from the head down, because Trump gives them a green light, because these super PACs are all liars, right? They say, oh, we don't coordinate. No, DeSantis isn't in the race yet, so he hasn't unleashed his PAC, and they haven't spent any money attacking Donald Trump. That's because DeSantis told him not to, because he's not even sure he's going to get in the race, in my opinion.
He hasn't even announced yet.
I know.
He hasn't even announced yet, and Trump's like, no, I'm going to murder you anyway.
Yeah, no, that's right.
Yeah.
And Trump gave the green light to his PAC, obviously, to go behead Ron DeSantis.
Yeah.
He said, I want that meatball on a platter, okay? And
Mohammed bin Salman's jealous.
Well, wow, okay. So we said it's a metaphor, it's a metaphor.
Yeah.
Okay, but guys, all of these ads are devastating. These ads are amazing. And look, it leads me to think two things. One, Biden's not gonna run ads like this. Biden, we just showed you earlier in the show, Biden's 3-minute ad. We nearly fell asleep in the middle of it. Biden's gonna run ads about my Republican friends. I love them so much. I want them to be wonderful and strong and terrific. Oh, you're voting for them? Damn it, right? So Trump's gonna rip Biden's head off this time around. So that's one issue, right? Second, I don't know if DeSantis is going to get in this race, man. I mean, this is brutal, and the ad, the other part of it is that it's true. That is true. Yeah, okay, DeSantis was dead in the water. Trump did rescue him, and Trump, see, he has no. There are no rules. He has no constraints. So he looks like a mob boss in that ad. I guarantee you, Democratic consultants would be like, "Oh no, that looks really bad. You look like you're intimidating him, and you're leering over me. It looks like you're a mob boss." And Trump would say, "Goddamn right I do," and his voters love that.
I love that you're thinking about this in the context of Trump versus Biden, which I think is the right way to think of it, because that's what we're thinking about moving forward. But as I watch this Trump ad against DeSantis, I can't help but feel a gigantic sense of envy, because I wish we had progressive candidates that were willing to use this type of political attacks and ads against corporate Democrats that they run against.
Or even Republicans.
Or Republicans, exactly, yeah, 100%.
No, I know, look, man, Rebellion PAC just doesn't have enough money. Go to rebellionpac.com, because we'll run ads like this all day long. But we need more resources to make that happen. Yeah. So, but look, to Anna's point, so the DC people look at this and go, oh my God, you guys are helping Donald Trump by saying his ads are good. And if you just shut up and we all pretend Biden's ads are good, he'll win.
Yeah, except we're not.
That's not how it works.
We're not in the puppet business.
Yeah, so there's two massive problems with that. It's not even true. That's what all of media did for Hillary Clinton, and she didn't win. So this whole idea of, oh, we're just gonna brainwash everybody into thinking that these corporate Democrats are really for the American people, okay? It just doesn't work.
I thought she didn't win because of Susan Sarandon.
Oh, yeah, of course. Okay. But the second more important reason is, no, our job is to be honest with you guys, okay? And it doesn't help to be dishonest. So, no, those are killer ads.
They are.
And DeSantis is almost like, he's lost 20 points, almost 30 points in some polls before he even put his shoes on. And Trump, when it comes to politics, is a killer.
Now, Trump is also willing to spend a considerable amount of money on these attack ads. If you're wondering where all that fundraising went to, right? The fundraising where he claimed to be trying to raise the resources necessary to fight the results of the 2020 election. He didn't actually spend that money on what he claimed he was gonna spend it on. Looks like he's spending it on this. Because since April, the super PAC, Make America Great Again, Inc., has been launching a $1.5 million ad campaign every week. Every week. And Ron DeSantis hasn't even announced yet.
Yeah, so I mean, it's such a classic Trump thing too. A stop to steal, I'm really worried about it. Oh my God, those patriots on January 6th, we need to protect them. Doesn't send them a dime. He hoards all the money for himself. Of course he does. And now he's spending it fighting another Republican.
It's insane. Okay, but DeSantis also keeps stepping in it. So recently he was in Japan and he was asked about Donald Trump and the election. And his response was so awkward. I don't know what is going on with this guy. I mean, I guess the higher they rise, the harder they fall. And I think we're watching him, witnessing him fall as we speak. Here's an example of that.
Governor, polls show you falling behind Trump. Any thoughts on that?
Guys, I'm not a candidate, so we'll see if and when that changes.
But what happened with that face, though?
Yeah, what happened with that head?
In case you missed it, there it is. It's gonna be all right. Act normal.
Yeah, I know, he's so nervous. The race hasn't even started and he's like nervous. Forget these pictures, those pictures are funny, but the head movement was my favorite part. I rewatched it like 3 times. I'm like, is this real or did somebody AI this thing? Because he's like, I'm not a candidate yet. Look at him, he's doing the same.
He's so uncomfortable.
Oh, Jesus.
Now he had a sit down interview with Sean Hannity as well, and he was asked about Trump's attacks. Let's take a look at his answer.
The last time I interviewed President Trump, I was there in 2018, and I always saw the two of you as friends. And I said to him, a very simple question I asked him. I said, what happened? And I think it's only fair to ask you the same question. What do you think happened?
You know, I enjoyed supporting him when he was president. We worked really hard for his reelection in Florida. And I always had a good relationship with him. And then once the midterm election happened, he started taking shots at me. I didn't really do anything to do it except do a good job. But that's fine. I mean, Sean, you know, when you're making things happen, you take incoming from a variety of targets. So that's just the nature of the business.
All right, so obviously he was not doing a sit-down interview. He was still in Tokyo as Hannity was interviewing him. I don't know why DeSantis's team put him directly in front of the sun for the interview, but that was awkward. I missed what he said though. I think we need to watch it one more time with some special effects to enhance the experience.
What do you think happened?
You know, I enjoyed supporting him when he was president. We worked really hard for his reelection in Florida. And I always had a good relationship with him. And then once the midterm election happened, he started taking shots at me. I didn't really do anything to do it except do a good job.
Poor Ronnie.
Yeah. Look, politicians, this is why Trump wins. Politicians don't know how to be real people. Such an easy answer. Why don't you say, here's what happened. It looks like we're gonna run against each other in the upcoming Republican primary, so he started attacking me. And by the way, so DeSantis doesn't want to say he's running yet. So it's still super easy to do it. Apparently Trump thinks I'm gonna run against him and he's worried about it. So he started attacking me and no one else. I guess that's because he thinks I'm the leading candidate. I haven't even made up my mind yet. Hey, Donnie, bring it down, okay? So
you scared?
And look, if you're scared, maybe you should, run ads against Democrats. Oh, you're more scared of me than you are of Democrats because you think I could beat you. But okay, hey, whatever. Just be light, man. Just answer real way instead of like doing the, I don't know what happened. I didn't do anything to him. I swear I didn't do anything to him.
The final thing that I want to say about all of this is, considering how much stronger Trump appears in comparison to Ron DeSantis, considering how scared Ron DeSantis appears to be, it is puzzling to me that Trump does not want to debate in the Republican primaries. Well, so that's a news story. He says he doesn't want to do the debates. Does he not realize that, as much as I hate to admit this, that's where he tends to perform pretty well,
especially in Republican primaries. So when he got to the general election with Biden, he clowned himself because he has no brakes in the car. So he was like swerving out of control, and it turned off independent voters and it turned off a lot of voters and drove him to Biden. But when he's in a Republican primary and he has no brakes in the car, the Republican voters love it. When he's smashing into everyone, telling them his penis size and calling them like little Marco and low energy Jeb.
Lying Ted.
Lying Ted. His wife is ugly. His dad's a killer. Okay, the Republicans eat that stuff up. Yeah, but I'd be surprised if he didn't debate, because I think what he's listening to now is consultants telling him, no, you have like a 20 to 30 point lead. People with that big a lead don't debate. They try to run away from debates. And that's what Biden's trying to do. He's like, oh no, I'm above it. I'm the president. Dude, you're worried about being able to put two senators together in a debate. Let's keep it real as to why the DNC is trying to end debates. But great, we have two guys who are right now by far leading in the race to become the Republican and Democratic nominees. And they both don't want to debate. They both have no interest in the democratic process. They both want to run their campaigns from a basement. But one guy is surrounded by pillows and the other one's got some serious weapons, and you just saw him unleash one of those, right? So Trump is launching nukes from his basement and Biden's launching pillows.
But not my pillows.
Yeah, no, definitely not those. And Ron DeSantis is launching nothing. So Meatball, get in the game.
All right, when we come back from the break, an explosive story that I wish got a lot more attention, how the Sackler family basically corrupted an incredibly important non-governmental organization that provides advisement on incredibly important policies that have to do with pharmaceutical drugs.
And later in the show, you want to talk about a cat fight. Forget DeSantis and Trump. Wait till you see Steven Crowder and Candace Owens. Oof. Man, that's some face ripping. So, all right, we got that in a little bit. Stay right here. All right, back on TYT, Cenk, Anna, and look at this. Chef Rockstar gifted 10 Young Turks memberships on YouTube. Thank you, we really appreciate it. Casper's got more news.
All right, well, this story is quite a doozy. The Sackler family, meaning the family behind the largest opioid scandal, has funneled tens of millions of dollars to a non-governmental organization that actually advises both the White House and Congress on drug-related policy. And the institution has failed to disclose this very clear conflict of interest. Now, the piece reported by the New York Times is an explosive one, an incredibly important one that shows how these governmental and non-governmental organizations take money from certain special interests that then leads to the publication of studies that misinforms the policymakers at hand. And that is exactly what happened here with what the Sacklers did, according to the reporting from the New York Times. So I'm gonna read some of the relevant excerpts, but it's really important that you guys actually read the piece for yourselves. There's so many tidbits in there that we just don't have time to get into. But here is the gist of the story. According to Christina Jewett at the Times, the national academies have kept quiet about their decision to accept roughly $19 million in donations from members of the Sackler family, the owners of Purdue Pharma, the maker of the drug OxyContin, and it's notorious for fueling the opioid epidemic. So $19 million is no joke, and the donations to the national academies began in the year 2000. By the time we hit 2017, they had already donated millions of dollars. So a $14 million donation was actually made in 2008 by Dr. Raymond Sackler and his wife Beverly Sackler. They did this through their foundation, and the National Academies continues to advise the government on drug policy, including painkillers. So unlike the World Health Organization, the Times writes, which was accused of being manipulated by Purdue and later retracted two opioid policy reports, the National Academies has not conducted a public review to determine if the Sackler donations influenced its policymaking, despite issuing two major reports that influenced national opioid policy. And by the way, we're gonna get into one of these reports, which was just rife with misinformation, unfortunately misinformed policymakers and led to additional prescriptions of these painkillers. One of those reports released in 2011 and now largely discredited claimed that 100 million Americans suffered from chronic pain, an estimate that proved to be highly inflated. I'm gonna get to the details on that report in just a moment, but understand how this works. Sackler family provides massive donations to the National Academies. The National Academies then puts out reports indicating that far more Americans are struggling with pain-related issues, chronic pain, than is actually happening in reality. And that report leads policymakers to agree to increasing or allowing for the increase of opioid-related prescriptions. And as we know, opioid deaths in this country skyrocketed. Addiction to opioids and then later heroin skyrocketed. I mean, we're still grappling with this epidemic as we speak, and the details are just so incredibly damning. Before we get to it, Cenk, what are your thoughts so far?
Yeah, so the bottom line is actually really easy to understand. They give tens of millions of dollars to this organization, and then this organization puts out a paper saying that 100 million, 42% of the country is in chronic pain. That's an absurd number. No doctor believes that number. That's preposterous. They should have laughed them out of the room instantly and questioned, hey, where's your funding coming from? Because that number makes no sense at all. And it turns out it's not just Purdue. One of the guys who wrote the report had his own company that was in the pain medication business. It's like the most biased report you could imagine. And the real number, by the way, according to doctors, is 7 to 21%. So I believe 7% makes sense in that ballpark. I'll trust the real doctors, right? But guys, this is how they buy off every part of our government, even the non-governmental organizations that then inform government decisions. And so they buy everything, because as long as the government allows them to sell heroin, they're gonna make so much money. By the way, government websites literally say that OxyContin and heroin are in the same category of drugs. And that's of course why people got hooked on it. And then they went to heroin afterwards because it was cheaper, et cetera.
Cheaper, and it was after the government realized that there was an opioid epidemic, so they started to restrict the prescription of the drug. But at that point, so many Americans were hooked that they ended up turning to the black market for heroin, which yes, was also cheaper and easier to obtain. Now, I wanted to give you those specific details. So Cenk mentioned panelists within the National Academies who had their own organizations. So Dr. Richard Payne is a perfect example. He's with the American Pain Society Physicians Group. That group took $900,000 from the Sackler family. Another example, another panelist with the National Academies was Myra Christopher. And Myra Christopher was actually swapping emails back in 2007 with Purdue staff about talking points to respond to news broadcasts that were critical of opioids. So at the time of that 2011 report that significantly overestimated how many Americans were dealing with chronic pain. Christopher was the president of the Center for Practical Bioethics, which was a nonprofit based in Kansas City, Missouri. Purdue gave that organization $934,770, okay? So let's get to the 2011 report and how that came to fruition, because Purdue Pharma, or a representative, I should say, for the National Academies claims this money that we took from the the Sackler family had nothing to do with our decisions, okay? So Megan Lowry is her name, a spokeswoman for the National Academy, said in a statement that the Sackler donations were never used to support any advisory activities on the use of opioids or on efforts to counter the opioid crisis. However, take a look at this timeline of events and you can decide for yourselves. By the way, I think that these types of donations should be completely outlawed. The National Academies receive 70% of its funding from the federal government. They should not be allowed to take additional funding from, families that own pharmaceutical companies and have, a financial interest in being drug pushers. But nonetheless, the Pain Care Forum, which is a group co-founded by Bert Rosen, the Purdue lobbyist, pushed for legislation introduced in 2007 and 2009 that included calling for a National Academies report to increase the recognition of pain as a significant public health problem. Now, soon after the measure passed in 2010, Rosen convened the Pain Care Forum at a 10 p.m., meaning 10 o'clock at night gathering to focus on meetings with the Institute of Medicine, the former name for the National Academy of Medicine, and for membership on IOM committee, meaning the Institute of Medicine committee. At the same time, the National Academies was forming the committee that would produce its 2011 opioids report, which included the estimate that about 100 million or 42% of American adults were in pain, a figure that researchers later found to be significantly inflated. And I should note, in reference to what Cenk mentioned earlier, later the CDC did its own study into this and they're like, no, not 41%. The number is actually closer to 7 to 21%.
Yeah, so look, this is so absurd because that Dr. Payne that Anna mentioned is a perfect example. First of all, let's note how funny it is that his name is Dr. Payne.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, it's Payne, but it is pronounced Payne, and he does work at the Payne Center, but that's Pain, as in the actual pain. Okay, so he's getting money. His organizations are getting money from both sides, right? You've got the organization we're talking about here, then you've got his Pain Institute, et cetera, and they're shoveling money towards this guy. And lo and behold, he says, "Wow. Pain is a giant problem in America that could probably be fixed by this exact drug." Okay, and is it addicting? Well, I wouldn't worry about that. In another study that the Sacklers paid for, they concluded that people weren't really getting addicted to oxy. It was, quote, a pseudo addiction.
Right.
Okay. So, but unfortunately, because mainstream media in this country has said that corporations giving money to politicians and government officials is perfectly normal and acceptable, and that we shouldn't be concerned about it, everybody does it in such brazen ways. So now after all those people died, now hundreds of thousands of people over all those years, now the New York Times writes a good story about, hey, maybe they shouldn't have taken the money a decade ago and maybe we should have been more vigilant, et cetera. I appreciate the story and it's a good piece of journalism.
It is, it's an excellent piece, yes.
Yeah, and from time to time, like we tell you all the time, the New York Times and other mainstream media, especially print outlets, do really good investigative pieces, right? But they'll forget about it. And tomorrow they'll be telling you that when Ted Cruz or Nancy Pelosi takes tens of millions of dollars from another drug company, that no, it doesn't affect them at all.
Well, it's interesting because they seem to report stories like this as if it's in a vacuum, when this type of corruption has really been indicative of our political system. It's now ingrained, baked into our political system. Every facet of our political system, whether we're talking about Congress, whether we're talking about the FDA, whether we're talking about, in this case, non-governmental organizations that advise on drug policy. And so the other point, the final point that I want to make about this is, oftentimes you will hear from Democratic politicians repeat that we believe in science. Science, science, science. We believe in science. But we also know that with the corruption that is allowed into these scientific studies. I mean, you have the Koch brothers who funded all sorts of nonsense junk science that minimized the impact of the climate emergency. They would fund entire science departments on university campuses to essentially sway the research that those campuses were doing on climate change. I give you that example in addition to this example to say that the science can be manipulated when corruption is introduced into the process. And that is what we're seeing here. And it's a scary world to live in when you don't know what to trust.
100%. And look, guys, there's good people that work at that organization. There's good doctors, scientists, etc. And in fact, when a couple of the preeminent scientists on the governing council of the organization found out that they had taken money from the Sacklers before writing that report, they had no idea, even though they were on the governing council. And that's part of how you, like media and political figures, etc. They all are so hush-hush about the corruption and normalize it so much that even some people in their own organizations don't realize they're doing it. And when they found out, they were super pissed. So then they ask, hey, is there any way that we can pull that report back, right? And one of the people that are leading the organization says the classic Obama line, we don't look backwards, we look forwards.
It's so pathetic.
Yeah, well, that's if you committed crimes in the past, that's why you don't look backwards. Obama did that on behalf of George Bush and Dick Cheney. And in this case, they're doing it on their own behalf. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Had been a perfectly good organization for a long time and can be, but Anna's right. The minute you start taking that corporate money, it's good night, Irene. And by the way, I would argue the same thing happened to NPR. The minute they start taking the corporate money, all of a sudden all the progressives are bad, corporate status quo is awesome, etc. And then now corruption has become so standard that it's no longer the exception, it's the rule.
Yeah.
So that's why it's like when we criticize reporters, they feel like the fish that is being asked, how's the water? They're like, what water? Because they swim in corruption so much, they don't even see it anymore. I mean, look, these guys selling, in essence, heroin in suits is basically like the Mexican drug cartels coming in and going, hey, National Academy of Medicine, etc. Why don't I give you guys $19 million and then you write a report about how great the drug cartels are?
Yeah, listen, the Sackler family should be in prison. They should be in prison. How many Americans died because of their drug pushing? And there's no conversation about that. Obviously, they're going bankrupt, they're paying fines. I think drug traffickers should be in prison. These are drug traffickers. Finally, the same spokesperson from the National Academies, Megan Lowry, was asked like, all right, well, now that this is an issue, right? Conflict of interest, what are you guys gonna do about it? Lowry added that the organization had been prevented from returning the Sackler money because of legal restrictions and donor unwillingness to accept returned funds.
That's such a BS excuse.
It totally is.
Of course, look, you could do what other organizations like Tufts University have done, which is redirect the money to prevention and treatment of people who are addicted to these awful drugs that you had a huge hand in pushing forward. But the number one thing to take away from this story is as always, when the media tells you that the corporate money doesn't corrupt the politicians, the government officials, and the non-government organizations that they give money to, it is absurd. The whole point of that money is to corrupt, and it works almost every time.
When we come back for the second hour of the show, we're gonna talk about the injustice around the Breonna Taylor story. But if you thought that that was a story of injustice, wait till you hear the updates involving the officer who shot the bullet that killed her. We've got an update on that and more. Don't miss it. We'll be right back.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of The Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.